I'm Candice Malcolm, and this is the Candice Malcolm Show. We have a great episode for you folks. We have Dr. Ted Morton joining the program in just a little bit. But first, I want to talk about what happened yesterday in Saskatoon. So as you know, Prime Minister Mark Carney met with the premiers in Saskatoon for their annual First Ministers meeting. This meeting was focused on nation building, focused on removing interprovincial trade barriers to strengthen Canada's economy amid U.S. trade pressures. Now, if you listen to the legacy media, if you watch the CBC, they will tell you that this meeting was a staggering success, that Mark Carney is a grown-up, that he commanded the room, that he seems committed to working together, even with Conservative premiers, to grow our economy. Let me just give you a sample of some of the glowing media coverage that he received. So here is our friends over at the National Post. The best meeting we've had in 10 years. Carney premiers united on nation-building projects. Next, from the CBC, premiers express optimism after pitching major projects to Carney. Next, CTV News says premiers heap praise on meeting with Mark Carney, but no specific projects identified. That's a key point. We'll get to that in a minute. Next, from Global News, Mark Carney and premiers say they're united on energy projects, but no final list. And even the Calgary Herald, check out this headline, folks. Danielle Smith vows to work with Carney, says he's way better than Justin Trudeau. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith hasn't scored a pipeline, but she's willing to work with Prime Minister Carney, saying he is nothing like Justin Trudeau. So if you just listen to that, you would think, wow, Canada's on the right track. Mark Carney has sure gotten the job done. And I'm willing to hold out hope for optimism. I'm a generally optimistic person about the future. Maybe Mark Carney really is nothing like Justin Trudeau. Maybe he really will placate the radical environmentalist faction of his own party and commit to building pipelines. But I am going to give it to you straight. I'm a little more skeptical, a little bit more pessimistic, and I'm going to tell you why. Let me just walk you through first what happened. So here is what Mark Carney wrote on X. He posted this after his meeting. He writes, "The premiers and I want to make Canada a global energy superpower and build the strongest economy in the G7. Wow, so do I. That's how almost sounds like a conservative." He says, "We're working together to break down trade barriers across the country and get big nation-building projects off the ground." I just have to point this out. Check out this picture that he posted. And if we just zoom in on Premier Danielle Smith, look at her face. She just doesn't look happy in this picture. What an odd choice for a photo to post on social media. Next, here is Mark Carney telling reporters that the energy projects will be selected using specific criteria to meet Canada's highest environmental standards. Let's play that clip.
I think there's a shared understanding based on our discussion of the main criteria for consideration. I listed them. They're in the communique. I'm not going to repeat them given interest of time. What's being clear is what's being put in place, or what is being proposed, will be proposed in legislation, is the ability of the federal government to devote the right resources to these projects, to make quick decisions about those projects that respect our environmental responsibilities, other responsibilities, work with the provinces directly to move forward and to get the country building.
Now, specifically, he also said that Canada is open to building pipelines. This is the big question, the big point of contention. Will there be new pipelines built under the Mark Carney Liberal government? He said he's open to it, but it has to be specifically for what he calls decarbonized oil. Let's play that clip.
Specifically within energy, opportunities, yes, for an oil pipeline to get to Tidewater. Now, within the broader context of national interest, the interest is in, as mentioned in the press release, decarbonized barrels. So working alongside forms of decarbonization for those barrels. That is absolutely in our interest.
Decarbonized. Okay, we're going to break that down a little bit. So at the end of the day, despite all the excitement, all of the positive praise from legacy media and some premiers, there was no specific projects that were identified. We're not leaving this meeting with anything concrete planned. There's no deals signed. There's nothing listed. Carney emphasized that any project has to meet the highest environmental standards. So does that mean that he's just going to say that he would, in theory, be okay with an oil pipeline, but then it will be destined to get rejected once the environmental standards get applied? I mean, that's what Bill C-69, after all, is all about. Next, Carney talked about decarbonized oil. So by this, he's meaning carbon Catcher, which is a hugely expensive project that basically the private sector doesn't see they're not willing to invest in it because it's so expensive. It doesn't really help with their bottom line. And there's no guarantee at the end of the day that the government will be in agreement with future oil and gas development. So it's not really worth the investment. That's why the governments have to get involved in the first place, because there isn't really a business case for this stuff. And finally, Mark Carney says that, just like Justin Trudeau said, the projects need to have First Nations involvement and essentially approval. So we're sort of talking about a veto power, right? The idea that you could have 95% of First Nations agreeing with a project, but then you can always find some unelected hereditary chiefs to block the project. That's exactly what happened with the Coastal GasLink pipeline in British Columbia. So forgive my skepticism, but this all sounds a lot like Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. It sounds a lot like the Liberal government that we've had over the past 10 years. And at the end of the day, why would people like Gerald Butts, Kathleen McKenna, and Stéphane Guilbeault, why would they back Mark Carney if they believed that he was just going to turn on them and build the pipeline? I kind of think that there's more going on behind the scenes. So we're going to have to wait and see. Maybe we should be optimistic. Maybe we should be happy that Carney is at least at the table and having these discussions with people like Premier Danielle Smith. And, she seems like she's somewhat happy by the meeting. But again, I'm still a little bit skeptical. Okay, I want to bring on our guest to get his comments and thoughts on all of this. I'm very pleased today to be meeting with one of the biggest figures in politics in Alberta. I'm talking about Dr. Ted Morton. He was a key figure at the Calgary School, the University of Calgary, where he taught for decades. He co-authored the 2001 Firewall letter pushing for Alberta's provincial autonomy. Of course, he was a progressive conservative MLA in that province from 2004 to 2012. And he's an author of a very important book that was published in 2020 called The Moment of Truth, How to Think About Alberta's Future, that was published alongside economist Jack Mintz and Professor Tom Flanagan. So, Dr. Morton, thank you so much for joining us.
It's good to be with you again, Candice.
So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the First Minister's meeting and all of the news that came out of it.
Well, I listened to your introductory remarks, and I guess I share your skepticism. I think we can be confident that Mark Carney is a lot more intelligent than Justin Trudeau, but does that make him better or more dangerous? And he still seems to be dancing around both sides. Decarbonized oil, what's that going to mean? But I think, to be fair both to him and to Premiers Smith and Moe, Saskatchewan and Alberta premiers, I think we're kind of in a honeymoon period, or trial marriage, whatever you want to call it. And they're hoping that, I think, Carney, the banker, the economist, will prevail over Carney, the politician. And I think one of the quotations I read from Danielle Smith, Premier Smith of Alberta, was that any of these big infrastructure corridors that you want to build, whether it's east, west, or north, you're looking at billions and billions of dollars. How are you going to pay for that? The only way you're going to pay for it is to start getting more Western Canadian oil and gas to global markets, global prices at economically competitive rates. So I think we're in as I said, a trial marriage or a honeymoon that lasts maybe a couple months, but clearly Moe and Smith, Alberta and Saskatchewan, are going to see the talk turned into action.
Well, and the fact that they're saying that behind the scenes or around the table, he's much better than Justin Trudeau. I mean, I interviewed Premier Smith back when Mark Carney was just running for Liberal leader, and she worried that because of his book values and his ideology that he professed, that he was going to be worse than Justin Trudeau. So I want to go back to some of Smith's words right here in the Calgary Herald. Ron Bell writes that Smith vows to work with Carney and says he's way better than Justin Trudeau. The Premier says Carney is a dramatic improvement over Trudeau since he recognizes the value of Alberta oil and wants to get it to market and get it to Asia. On X, she posted that she was encouraged by the discussions that she had, and I want to play a few clips. So first, here she is yesterday speaking to reporters, saying that specifically there are 9 terrible laws and terrible policies that are hurting investment, and that this is what she wants to see addressed. So let's play this quick clip.
I think that there seems to be an appetite to talk about getting pipelines built so that we can get oil and gas to market. The problem is, unless we address the 9 terrible policies that have damaged investor confidence, we're not going to get the proponents coming forward with major investments.
So she's laid out these 9 terrible laws, terrible policies. She put it in a letter that she gave to him before the meeting. And yet, I don't think that any of these were really addressed. So, yes, Mark Carney is showing up at the table. Yes, he's giving lip service to the idea of building nation building projects and getting Canada's economy off the ground. But the devil's in the details. And I don't think that he's addressed the details at all. What do you think of that?
I would tend to agree. I saw nothing in the news coverage specifically referring to the reversal or removal or amending of any of those 9 policies. As I mentioned to you just before we came on, of those 9 policies, I think 4 or 5 have been enacted just in the 4 or 5 past years. Uh, so the book that you referenced, Moment of Truth, that Jack Manson, Tom Flanagan, and I did 5 years ago, we thought we make the case then that it's time for the Western premiers to start playing offense rather than defense because things are getting worse. And of the 9 policies that Smith and Moe have identified as necessary to move forward, almost half of those are since we wrote that book 5 years ago. So things have been getting worse, not better. Uh, what's Carney going to do? Well, look, it's going to be an interesting 6 months.
Well, I think you might have to write an updated chapter on that book because I did interview you right after that book
That's
came
right.
out,
That's
and
right.
it was almost more abstract back then. And now I'm looking at the title again, right? So, how to think about Alberta's future, and you have a sort of like weather vane or one of those signs pointing different directions, and the options are go it alone, 51st state, let them freeze, roll over, pop on a bust, or build a firewall, which seems sort of like you had a crystal ball and you were looking into the future at what the conversation might look
Well,
like in
that
2025.
was the reality in 2020, but then COVID hit and it pushed everything else off the, if you like, the political map, the public awareness for what, a year and a half, at least. And
At least.
but as I said, we're not just back to where we were in many respects. The oil and gas producing provinces, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and BC, to consider, are worse off today than we were 5 years ago.
Certainly interesting. Okay, well, I do think that the elephant in the room in all of these discussions with the first ministers meeting yesterday really comes down to the future of Alberta and Alberta independence. So I do want to ask you a few questions about this, Dr. Morton. But for folks on YouTube, we're going to cut the video off here. And if you want to watch the rest of the conversation, it's going to be good. Head on over to Juno News, become a premium subscriber, and you can enjoy the rest of this interview right now.